For number 5, we have the Anaheim Mighty Ducks over the Detroit Red Wings, 2003. While the story may not be nearly as dramatic as the movie, it was quite an upset nonetheless. It appeared Anaheim was going to be overmatched with having to deal with Steve Yzerman, Brett Hull, Chris Chelios, and many others. Anaheim won all 4 games by exactly 1 goal, who had a goaltender who was in fire in Jean-Sebastien Giguère, which included 64 saves in Game 1, which was a 2-1 win in triple overtime, and stopped 165 of the Red Wings, 171 shots, and swept Detroit. 2 of the 4 games went into overtime. To be more specific, Game 1 went into triple overtime when Paul Kariya knocked the puck home with 3:18 left. The other game, which went into overtime, was Game 4 when the Ducks' Steve Rukin scored. The Ducks won the same way in Game 4. For number 4, we have the San Jose Sharks knocking off the St. Louis Blues when something happened that almost never does during the 2000 playoffs. An 8 seed beat a 1 as the Blues had their first 3-game losing streak of the season after scoring 113 points to get to the playoffs at the worst time possible, one that knocked them out of the Stanley Cup playoffs in the first round. While they were able to beat top-seeded St. Louis, they weren't able to get past the second round as they lost to the Dallas Stars in 5 games. After grabbing a commanding 3-1 series lead, the Blues made comebacks in Games 5 and 6 by the scores of 3-2 and 5-3. But it was to no avail as they held St. Louis to 1 goal in Game 6 during a 3-1 win over the Blues. For number 3, we have the 1993 New York Islanders, who had to overcome certain odds that other teams on this list didn't. They had to compete with one of the greatest players of all time in Mario Lemieux. As a matter of fact, you would think the Penguins would be more inspired because this was the season that Lemieux had come back after having Hodgkin's disease and led the league in scoring with 69 goals and 91 assists, giving him 160 points for the season, a good 12 points over the next leading scorer in Buffalo's Pat LaFontaine, who had 53 goals and 95 assists. His cohort Jaromir Jagr was still at the top of his game and contributed 34 goals and 60 assists for the season. On top of that, the Islanders were missing their star offensive player in Pierre Turgeon. So how did New York make this astounding comeback? Quite simply, they beat Pittsburgh at their own game. In the 4 games, neither team scored fewer than 2 goals. Their 4 wins were by scores of 3, 2 in Game 1, 6, 5 in Game 4, 6, 3 in Game 5, 7, 5 in Game 6, and then the clincher they took to overtime in a 4-3 win in overtime, with the winner being scored by David Volek. For number 2, we have a dandy, and one which features one of the greatest rivalries in sports, when in 1971, the Montreal Canadiens beat the Boston Bruins in 7 games. During the 1970 to 1971 season, the Bruins' Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito combined for 291 points, 152 for Esposito and 139 for Orr. Esposito's 152 points are 16th most points in history and only one of 6 players to crack that list. Wayne Gretzky contains 9 of those slots. Mario Lemieux has 4, plus Steve Yzerman and Connor McDavid each have 1. Despite the greatness of Orr and Esposito, the Canadiens had an X-factor that nobody may have taken into consideration going into the series. Their rookie goalie Ken Dryden, who later came on to be one of the game's greatest goalies. One might wonder, how was Dryden such a mystery at such a prominent position? He only played 6 games during the regular season, but played 20 during the postseason, including all 7 games in the Stanley Cup. During the Cup, despite only being a rookie, he had a 91.2 save percentage, which accounted for 260 saves, which included a 49 save performance in Game 5 and a 46 save charmer in Game 7. Despite having his 49 save performance in Game 5, the Bruins were still able to amass a 7-3 win, but had better luck in Game 7 as he held the Bruins to 2 goals in his 46 save performance, which resulted in a 4-2 win for Montreal. For the top upset in Stanley Cup playoffs history, we have what at the time was the present and future team of one of the greatest scorers in NHL history, and one you probably remember well if you have followed hockey for over 40 years. Wayne Gretzky. And yes, this is the series between the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings in the 1982 playoffs when the Kings beat the Oilers in 5 games. For the season, the Kings had 111 points, while the Oilers had a record that most years wouldn't even get them in the playoffs, 24-41-15 for 63 points during the regular season. For those who might know at the time, the great one was with Edmonton. That team also included a host of future stars, including Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, and Grant Fuhr. The game which truly changed the momentum was Game 3 when the Oilers went up 5-0 after the first 2 periods. But the Kings came back with 5 third-period goals. And then a Darrell Evans goal in overtime gave the Kings the win, putting them up 2-1, and was a series they ultimately won in 5 games. They won Game 5-7-4. The series itself was a good old-fashioned shootout as no team scored less than 2 goals the entire series, and in the Kings' 3 wins, they outscored the Oilers 23-17. In their 3 wins, this series was only a best-5, they won Game 1-10, 8, Game 3-6, 5 in overtime with scoring the game-winning goal with X amount of time left, and Game 5-7, 4.